Well, it's Wednesday. It's time for another Top 10 Tuesday. Yeah, maybe I should just make it weekly Top 10s, but I like the alliteration of Top 10 Tuesday, so it is what it is. My patrons voted, and we decided, or they decided rather, that it would be your top 10 creatures to choose as a sidekick. I know that might sound a little not specific, but I promise you it is. Stay tuned. I still like companion better than sidekick. I feel like sidekick has like a negative connotation. I don't know. Anyway, what's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and let's talk sidekicks. We're not just talking about, your Bucky to your Captain America or your Robin to your Batman. We're talking about the sidekicks mechanic system as introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It was originally in Unearthed Arcana, then small section of it was published in the Essentials Kit, and the final versions for levels 1 to 20 published in Chapter 4, the DM Tools section of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. For those of you unaware, basically pick a creature from the Monster Manual, or importantly, any D&D book as per the rules, from challenge rating up to CR 1/2 or below, and then you can try to get them, or you can that can be qualified, rather, as a sidekick. Then they can gain sidekick levels and go from levels 1 to 20 in that sidekick, and they kind of level up with the party, and they can fall into one of 3 categories: expert, warrior, or spellcaster. As a caveat, experts and spellcasters have to be able to speak at least one language. There are several creatures out there that can understand languages but cannot speak them. They are eligible for expert or spellcaster. And there are others that can also speak telepathically, but or they have telepathy, but they technically can't speak a language, so I don't think they qualify. So that being said, I got my list originally down to, looks like, 18 different options, and I've cut it back to 10. So as far as what I've eliminated from this, I went to D&D Beyond, I went to creatures, and I sorted from challenge rating nothing to challenge rating 1/2. And from that list, I called out any specific NPCs. So if you know a specific NPC from Out of the Abyss or Dragon Heist or Icewind Dale with a specific name, they have been cut. Because honestly, in theory, that NPC exists once. They are one instance in there, and if you're not playing that adventure, you getting them as a sidekick, probably not very likely. Things might be different, right? So for example, there might be like Water Davian Scout. Now, in theory, that's an option. That's a classification. That's a ranking. You could get that as an option, right? As opposed to, like, the Prince from Out of the Abyss, or Spider-Bait or Yuck Yuck, or one of those goblins from Out of the Abyss, right? They are specific NPCs, unless you're playing Out of the Abyss and your DM decides to give you them as an NPC or as a sidekick. That's not going to technically be an option for you. So we've removed that. We've also removed the funky sidekick or NPC options where they don't have a challenge rating, so they're technically qualified as challenge rating 0. For that, my best example would be Lifferlos, the treant character from Storm King's Thunder. If you look in Storm King's Thunder, he technically does not have a challenge rating. He's an ancient treant. He is listed as not having a challenge rating. If you were to look him up on D&D Beyond, he will show up as challenge rating 0 because the adventure did not give him a challenge rating. Obviously, I've removed everything like that because that would be like a challenge rating 7 creature that you'd be getting as a sidekick, which would just completely break the game. So we've removed those options as well. I also went through and looking at my list, I removed most things that I thought you would be ineligible to get. For example, like a Mains or a Lemure demon, like most demons and devils and things like that. Gnolls, for example, which are just mindless eating machines, things along those lines. Yes, I know they might have some intelligence, but for the most part, it seems unlikely that those types of characters you would be able to attain, get as a sidekick that will follow you indefinitely. There will be some on this list that I think, whether through great persuasion rolls, through things you work out with your DM, or possibly through summoning rituals or things like that, you might have an opportunity to get them on your side. Obviously, things that work really well would be things that are like animals or animalistic, in that you could animal handling an owlbear. Well, obviously an owlbear wouldn't work because it's too big, but something along those lines, right, where you could train it and in theory tame it to have it be a sidekick. Obviously, you can choose, these sidekicks can be everything from an animal all the way up to a very well-thinking individual that has their own special abilities and usefulness outside of that. Something else to consider in this list. I tried to make it as unbiased as possible, i.e. I love crabs, I love giant crocodiles, and things like that, and I did not put them on this list because they are not technically the best options for sidekicks. Some of these come with their own inherent abilities that are very powerful and will only be boosted by the fact that you are giving them class levels and an improving proficiency bonus. So that's all things to be considered, and I will be going through that right now, so stay tuned. Number 10. The Ambush Drake. The Ambush Drake is definitely only going to really qualify for your warrior subclass. This is the one that's going to be more or less the fighter type, but for being a fighter type, it gets one thing that's very important, and that is this guy right here, Pack Tactics. Anyone that can get access to advantage on attacks by just having an ally nearby, that's going to be big. It also gets this surprise attack, so happens to surprises a creature and hits during that first round of combat. It's going to get that extra 2d6 damage. Its bite, not too crazy in the damage department, a d6 +1 piercing. It does have resistance to poison damage, which is one of the more common damage types. A little bit of natural armor, 22 hit points isn't bad. Now if we go ahead and take a look at what the warriors get, it's going to get things like saving throw proficiencies. It's going to get some skills. We're not going to get martial weapons or anything like that. It is going to get a martial roll, so we can get a bonus to attack rolls if we want. Second wind, improved critical. Again, that improved critical is going to be big on the fact that we can get advantage on our attack rolls with Pack Tactics. We're going to get advantage on initiative rolls, potentially giving us even better chance to surprise people and then go first, getting that surprise attack damage, a boost to our armor class, and then Indomitable. Again, all working well. We're going to get extra attack as well. So this is a creature that does not have multi-attack. So at level 6, we're going to get 2 attacks. And then at level 15, we're going to get 3. It also says here, if the attack has a multi-attack action, it can use extra attack or multi-attack, not both. However, we don't have that, so we're just getting pure extra attacks. Again, it's kind of a dragon-like creature, so that's something people might want to get if they want to have that dragon. And if you follow, I think it's in Volo's Guide to Monsters, or that might have been a guard drake that had the multiple different types of them. But either way, ambush drakes look cool. I mean, look at this art, and if you or DM would be like I would allow you to change the type of drake to not necessarily be a green drake, to have it if you wanted it to be a blue drake and have resistance to lightning damage, or a red drake and have resistance to fire damage. That doesn't really change anything about it other than the resistance and the way it looks. So I think that that is a great choice for a very high level choice on this list. Number 9. The Blink Dog. Obviously, who doesn't want a good boy on their team? This one kind of looks like a Great Dane in the picture here. We have Candlekeep Mysteries coming out. You might be able to relive your Scooby-Doo fantasy with a Blink Dog. Its dexterity is 17. Reminder, you do get ability score improvements as you level up in a Sidekick class. So getting your attacking stat to be the maximum, pretty likely. Although it does say in the stat block here at the top, if we read about it, it says, if it's unclear whether a melee attack in the stat block uses strength or dexterity, it can use either. However, it looks pretty clear that it does use strength. So it would boost its armor class overall. It has decent hit points. It gets advantage on perception checks, relying on hearing and smell. It has its magical teleport ability, which is kind of the signature Blink Dog thing. Teleport any equipment it's wearing or carrying to 40 feet. That recharges on a 4 to 6, so something you can do frequently in combat as an action. Its bite attack does a d6 +1, but here's the thing, folks. It speaks a language. That language happens to be Blink Dog, but it speaks a language. Therefore, it qualifies as either an expert or a spellcaster. So I think, in my mind, spellcaster doesn't really work, because if you look at the ability scores, 10, 13, 11, it's not great as far as that goes, but it would make an excellent expert style character, where they list as like a wily street kid or a merchant, some sort of burglary type, a roguish type. What better than a rogue type that can teleport 40 feet? And it does have to be able to see it, so there's that qualifier, but it also has, no, it does not have dark vision. That would have been a nice thing. But it's going to get proficiency bonus actions, help as a bonus action. It's going to get cunning action as well. Expertise, it's going to get the coordinated strike. It's going to have evasion with that boosted dexterity. That's going to be big. It'll have reliable talent. And the fact that it can choose at the start a dexterity saving throw proficiency with its very high dexterity to boot, it'll make it a very good Dexy rogue type character. The only downside is it'll be more for infiltration and skill-based stuff and less about actually attacking, given that its attacking stats are based on strength. Number 8. The Anvilwrought Raptor. Unfortunately, this one's going to be stuck in the warrior role only, but it has some things that allow it to do some other cool stuff as well. So first of all, 18 hit points right out the gate, an armor class of 14, but it is immune to fire and poison damage, the two most common damage types in the game other than bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. Immune to charmed, exhausted, paralyzed, petrified, and poisoned. So this thing's pretty tanky, no pun intended, being made out of metal. Has dark vision out to 120 feet. Perception checks, keen sight on perception, which it has a pretty decent wisdom and a +4 perception check to start. Therefore, it has advantage on those checks if it's relying on sight. It has this mimicry feature, which I also really like, which is it can mimic any sound, including voices heard within the last 24 hours. And a creature that hears has to make an insight check to overcome it. But that's a useful recon thing that it can do, even as a warrior type. And it has multi-attack with its beak. Its beak does a d4 +3 damage. That's pretty good, right? That's based off of dexterity, which you can increase as you level up. And it obviously has the ability to be used as a familiar, but it doesn't require air, food, drink, or sleep. Therefore, it can be a sentinel and stay on watch all the time. It can go into areas that are potentially dangerous where there may not be breathable air. You don't have to worry about feeding it or giving it water all the time, where all of these other sidekicks, that's a thing that people don't really mention. You have a sidekick, it's going to need to have rations, it's going to need to have food, water, and so on. It's also going to need to sleep so it doesn't get exhausted. This guy, it doesn't have to do any of that. And again, as we said, as a warrior type, you're going to get a bunch of extra stuff, like extra attack. You're going to get that improved critical. Also, I should point out, too, I forgot to mention this earlier, that under the ability score section, it says whenever a sidekick's proficiency bonus increases, which it does right here in this table, you can increase the add +1 to the to hit modifier in its stat block and increase the DCs in its stat block. So for anything we've talked about, but specifically here, like the recorded mimicry, making it a DC 12 insight check, each time its proficiency bonus increases, as does the DC for that insight check. So good things going on there. Plus, I mean, I always love the concept of having like a familiar or some sort of bird pet to kind of, probably because of the mummy, right? Everybody loved, Horus, the peregrine falcon that would fly off. You would want something like that. And this is kind of a cool construct made out of metal. Now, also something else I realized, I picked mostly things that were neutral or unaligned so that you had an opportunity to try and convince them to join. And I'll talk about some bonus ones if your DM lets you choose evil options when we get to the end. Number 7. The only option on my list that is evil is the Magma Mephit. And the reason I put this on here is because Mephits are elementals. There are several spells and things that can allow you to summon them. And then I think you could make the argument to your DM, hey, I've summoned this with Conjure Minor Elementals. I'd like to try to do a little more to make it sort of bind it, whether with some sort of spell or ability, ritual, something like that. They're also only challenge rating 1/2, so I feel like if your DM is going to allow you to bind an elemental to your service, this would be the one. Obviously, I think all of the Mephits are challenge rating 1/2 or less. Dust and ice are also good options, but Magma I thought was the coolest in what it has. It is vulnerable to cold damage, which means it's going to take double damage from cold sources. So another reason I feel like would allow credence to have your DM allow you to have it, because it's very easy to kill. Immune to fire and poison damage and the poison condition. It does have the death burst ability, which hopefully you don't want your your ally here to die. But if it does, it kind of does a little fireball. It can make it look like magma if you find yourself in a magma situation. It does have innate spellcasting of heat metal once a day, which is kind of nice, but the DC is only 10. Its claws do a D4 plus a D4 +1 slashing plus a D4 fire damage. and it has a recharge on a 6 very minor 15-foot cone fire breath weapon, which again, not super high, but it does speak Ignean and Terran, so it technically qualifies for expert or spellcaster options. But again, its stats for spellcasting are 7, 10, and 10. But I like the concept of something that has a little bit of elemental damage to it. It has a little bit of AoE, and it can fit any 3 of the roles. The only downside to this one is you would need to have to convince your DM to allow you to do this. But like I said, I feel like out of some of the other options that I've seen people mentioning, and ones that I even thought of myself, this seems to be the more minor of all of those. Number 6. Satyr, and this is the variant Satyr from the Monster Manual, not the Satyr from the basic rules. And this version of the Satyr is the one that comes with the panpipes, and that's why we chose this one specifically, because it gives it extra options. So it speaks Common, Elvish, and Sylvan, so it does qualify for spellcasting, as well as expert, as well as fighter. It has a high dexterity and a 16, so it could be a good expert roguey type. It does have a 14 charisma as well, so it might prove to be a good charisma-based caster. It has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. That's a huge ability there. Its ram attack does 2d4 plus 1 damage. It is proficient in armor and a short sword and a short bow. Therefore, if you choose to go warrior, it will get proficiency in all weapons and all armor types. And it also has the pan pipes ability, which any creature within 60 feet of it that can hear the pipes must make a wisdom saving throw, currently of DC 13, or one of the following things will happen. It can choose, the creature can repeat at the end of each of their turns, and if they're successful, they're immune, but it can choose to do a charming melody, where they're charmed by it for a minute, a frightening strain, where they're frightened of it for a minute, or a gentle lullaby, where it falls unconscious for a minute. It also has a starting movement speed of 40 and 31 hit points to start, as well as having 3 skill proficiencies. Reminder that you only get the proficiencies granted to you from the class. So if we were to say, look at Warrior, at the start, they're going to get 2 from this list: Acrobatics, Animal Handling, Athletics, Intimidation, Nature, Perception, and Survival. Choose 2 from that, but this already has Perception, Performance, and Stealth, so we get an extra abilities, and then if you go Expert, you'll get more, and eventually get Expertise as well. So you have things going there. Also, they added in, just as a reminder, Proficiency bonus. They started putting this on all of the stat blocks so that you're aware if you go to choose one as a sidekick what its base proficiency bonus is, so you know whether it's higher or lower, and then you have that right there as a reference. So this would be good. It's chaotic neutral. It is a fey creature, but that could be a fun thing to try and convince them to join you. They also could be a fun, just companion to travel around with if you've always wanted your own satyr because you're a fan of Percy Jackson. Well, hey, now you might have one. So again, and like I said, it could fit any 3 of the different sidekick types. Number 5. The Valenar Hound. This time we're heading to Eberron Rising from the Last War, and I should have said that the Anvilwrought Raptor was from Mythic Odysseys of Theros. So unfortunately, due to language restrictions, this one will only be accessible with the Warrior sidekick type. However, this may have the best starting ability scores for anything that falls in that area. I could be wrong, but it's starting with a 17 Strength and a 15 Dexterity, also a 14 Constitution and a 15 Wisdom. So we're also starting with Perception Proficiency, and we have Keen Hearing and Smell, so advantage on smell and hearing-based perception checks. Again, a starting armor class of 14 and 19 hit points with a 40-foot movement speed. Remember, you get ability score improvements, so that first one could potentially bump your strength up to 18, your dex to 16, boost your armor class and your attack and damage. You do only have 1 bite attack that currently does a d6 plus 3 piercing, which is pretty nice, and it also has a built-in dexterity saving throw or be knocked prone. So it can bite things and then immediately get that knock prone attempt for free. Also, if your DM's super nice, they'll allow the bonding feature to work, where while it's bonded to you, you can communicate telepathically with it as long as you're within 100 feet of each other. And there's the variant ancestral trait ability from the Valenar animals, which is specifically here we're talking about the Hound. And you can see there are 8 options here, which could be 1 for bestow luck once a day, giving you advantage on the next ability check, attack roll, or saving throw made within the next hour. Burst of Speed, which recharges on a 6, which is a dash as a bonus action. Advantage on stealth checks, just outdoors all the time. It knows when a creature within 15 feet of it tells a lie. Very useful, even again, if it's a warrior type. This now is a good social roleplay ability. Fey Ancestry, giving it advantage on saving throws versus Charm and Frightened. Fey Step, giving it a once-a-day teleport, so kind of filling the Blink Dog role minorly while also being stronger than a Blink Dog. Quickness for a recharge on a 6 of Dodge as a bonus action, and Shrouded Step, it can't be tracked except by magical means, and it leaves no tracks or other traces of its passage. If your DM allows you to have one of those, or maybe even more of those, or get them as they level up, that could be awesome. This also kind of looks like a Great Dane, so again, if you are Great Dane-ish, rather. So if you wanted to make your Scooby-Doo character for, Scooby-Doo sidekick, rather, for Candlekeep Mysteries, maybe go for the Valenar Hound. It is also a fey creature, I forgot to mention that, so things that will affect, I guess it doesn't fall under the humanoid thing, so hold person and whatnot won't happen, or work on it, but that's most of the things on this list. Number 4. The dreaded Zorbo. This you might have seen before on my top 10 most deadly creatures under challenge rating 4. And that's for a reason, folks. These things are terrifying. And if this could be an ally for you, that'd be even better. So it does have starting proficiency in athletics, which is nice. Really crazy hit points to start too, right? 27 hit points. 30-foot climb speed as well, which is nice. Advantage on saving throws against, with magic resistance against spells and other magical effects. And then it has its natural armor ability. So it normally starts with an armor class of 10. However, unless it's standing or climbing on something, it might get better abilities here. So if it's on wood or bone, its AC jumps to 15. If it's on earth or stone, it jumps to 17. And if it happens to be standing or climbing on metal, its AC jumps up to 19. So if you happen to, I don't know how that qualifies. Maybe if you are wearing, it is a small creature. So if you are a medium creature wearing metal armor and it's climbing on you, does it technically now have an 19 AC? And even more deadly and terrifying to your enemies is its Destructive Claws ability, which is 2d6 plus 1 on the slashing damage, by the way. So that's not a small amount, and that's pretty swingy for 2d6. Even at a low level, you could potentially be rolling 13 damage if you roll max. But if the target is wearing armor, carrying a shield, or is in possession of a magic item that improves its armor class, they must make a DC 11 dexterity saving throw. On a failure, one of those items is deteriorated by the Zorbo and its claws, getting a cumulative -1 penalty to its armor class, and it gains a +1 bonus to its AC until the start of its next turn. Armor reduced to an AC of 10 or a shield or magic item that drops to 0 AC increase is destroyed. So this is a way for you to completely shut down enemy. Yeah, again, this has got to be someone in armor, but this is also a potential thing you could do, especially if this is going to be a warrior type where it's going to have multiple attacks in a turn. You could devastate an enemy armor wielder of some kind or someone with magic items. Again, might be a detriment to you if you guys wanted to eventually get those magic items from the creature, but this could quickly shut down like a Death Knight or someone with a really crazy high armor class because of the metal armor that they wear. Also, again, as its proficiency bonus increases, as will the dexterity saving throw for avoiding the Destructive Claws ability. So it could be pretty nasty and very powerful as an ally if you're able to convince one to join your team as a sidekick. Number 3. Svirfneblin, aka Deep Gnomes. As a fan of the Drizzt series, I am a big fan of Svirfneblin because of the whole world of Blingdenstone and the city of that, and Belwar Disengulp, Drizzt's ally and friend through that series. But as a neutral good character, and the fact that they are the only really Underdark race that doesn't suffer from sunlight sensitivity, there's a reasonable chance that you might encounter one on the surface. Also, as such, you could probably convince them to join you as they are a good race. And they come with a lot of benefits if you happen to score one, or I don't want to say that because they are a thinking creature, but if you happen to be presented one as a sidekick, they start with investigation, perception, and stealth skills. Proficiencies. They have dark vision out to 120 feet. They start with proficiency in War Pick and a Chain Shirt, which means if you happen to go warrior, if you go that route, they will get all weapons and all armor types. They have relatively middling ability scores, but they obviously are a thinking race and can talk, so they are eligible to be an expert or a spellcaster. They have the Stony Camouflage, so that's advantage on dex checks in rocky terrain. They have advantage on saving throws against Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma saving throws against magic, as they are a gnome. And they come with built-in innate spellcasting, and that is non-detection, the spell at will. Once a day, blindness, deafness, blur, and disguise self. Once again, those are all for free, regardless of what subclass or sidekick choice you make. So even if you choose to be a warrior type, you still get those spells, which will still increase as the proficiency bonus increases, and potentially your intelligence increases as well. And again, they have their war pick that does a d8 plus 2, but they also have these poison darts that do a d4 plus 2 piercing damage, and the target must succeed on a DC 12 con save or be poisoned for a minute. But again, that DC for the con save will increase as well as they level up. So this, I think, is this actually the first like humanoid on my list? I think so. I think it also might be the only humanoid on my list. But again, I'm a big fan of them, and you get a lot of bang for your buck if you happen to get one as a sidekick, because they come with built-in spellcasting. They have decent defenses in Stony Camouflage and Gnome Cunning. You're starting with 3 skill proficiencies, which means you're going to end up with a minimum 5. And again, Dark Vision out to 120 feet, 3 languages. They unfortunately don't speak Common, right? Just Gnomish, Terran, and Undercommon. But those are 3 decent languages depending on where you're going to be. Gnomish can get you a long way. Undercommon if you're dealing with the Underdark, and Terran is a an elemental language, a primordial subset. So I think overall they're a great choice, especially if you're looking to try to get a humanoid sidekick, or your DM's looking to give one and they're offering you an option. Maybe you can come up with an interesting story as to how you got a Svirfneblin in the party. Number 2. Giant Owl. Now this one is actually, I think, probably my personal favorite choice, and I'll tell you why in a little bit here, but there is a better one, which is what number 1 is. But if you take a look at this, the Giant Owl has a fly speed of 60 feet. So first of all, super maneuverable. Decent hit points right to start at 19 hit points. Proficiency in Stealth and Perception, 2 very useful abilities right out the gate. You're going to get Dark Vision out to 120 feet, also super useful, and Keen Hearing and Sight, giving you advantage on probably the 2 most common perception checks, Hearing and Sight, advantage on those. You're going to have Talons that do 2d6 plus 1, right? So we're dealing with 2d6, so that's a decent amount of damage, and one of the most important abilities for any creature is Flyby, which is it doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity when it leaves an enemy's reach. When it flies out of the enemy's fly in, make your attack, fly out. That's a thing you have always on. But most importantly of all is it speaks Giant Owl. Giant Owl is a language that it speaks. It therefore qualifies for Spellcaster and Expert as far as the sidekick types. And I would absolutely love the concept of a Giant Owl cleric-based spellcaster. I think that would be awesome, because it has, unfortunately, its ability scores aren't great in the casting department, right? 8 intelligence, 13 wisdom, 10 charisma, but 13 wisdom doesn't make it a bad, and it makes it a slightly better wisdom-based spellcaster. So you could choose druid, but I think cleric would be more fun. You're a fly-by medic here. So we're going to get 2 proficiencies, a saving throw. It's not unfortunately going to get light armor or anything, because it's not a humanoid, but it's going to get spellcasting. If you choose to go healer, you're going to get cleric or druid spell lists. And then again, cure wounds, guidance. These are, I think 2 cantrips. A first level from its spell list here are recommended. It gives you cure wounds, guidance, and sacred flame. And pretty much you're going to just get ability score improvements. You're going to get potent cantrips, which again, you have a crazy fly range, but if you could get yourself an attacking cantrip or something like Sacred Flame that will have a long distance based off of your wisdom, eventually with potent cantrips, you're going to get to add your wisdom modifier to that damage. You're going to get Empowered Spell, which is when you choose a school of magic. When you cast a spell by expending a spell slot, you can add your spellcasting ability modifier to the damage or healing roll. You could be a great healer that way. And then obviously your concentration can't be broken at level 20, but that's pretty late in the game. But either way, I really love the concept. And don't forget that it's not, it says healer, and the spell list is cleric and druid, not cleric or druid. So you have access to both, which means that you can get access to the attacking based cantrips and things like that from the druid list, but you could also be a 60-foot flyby spirit guardian's terror as a giant owl, and I think that that's pretty awesome. Number 1. Probably surprising no one, Pixie is number 1. The shockingest thing here is that Pixie is a challenge rating 1/4, but if you were to give something as powerful as a Pixie class levels, well, then we're going to get into some pretty nutty options. So first of all, I guess I misspoke about the Valenar Hound because a Pixie starts with a 20 dexterity. So again, even if you chose to make a Pixie a warrior type and you focus on it being a finesse-based warrior wielding like a rapier, let's say, you could, I mean, I guess technically it can't get a rapier because it's not a humanoid, right? Is that how that works? So the Sidekick gains proficiency with all armor, and if it is a humanoid or has a simple or martial weapon in its stat block, it gains proficiency with shields and all simple and martial weapons. So it technically doesn't gain proficiency with any weapons, which is a detriment to the Pixie in that respect, because if it could wield something like a rapier with a 20 dexterity, it would be crazy. But it starts with a 15 armor class. Because of that, it does have a fly speed of 30 feet. Starts with perception and stealth proficiencies here, and it can speak a language, which is Sylvan, which means it is eligible to be either an expert or a spellcaster. It has magic resistance, advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects, and innate spellcasting, which means at will, it's going to be having the Druid Craft cantrip, and the following spells are all accessible at will: Confusion, Dancing Lights, Detect Evil and Good, Detect Thoughts, Dispel Magic, Entangle, Fly, Phantasmal Force, Polymorph, or Sleep. Now, unfortunately, a lot of those, and there's some videos out there that talk about how it's one of the most broken combos out there because it has access to Polymorph. However, Polymorph says that you can only transform something into, your level? Let's see. Transform a creature. An unwilling creature must make a wisdom saving throw. Transformation. The new form can be any beast whose challenge rating is equal to or less than the target's or the target's level if it doesn't have a challenge rating. So the game statistics, blah, blah, blah. But you are giving yourself... Let me just read that again. So yeah, so if you wanted to transform yourself into something, you could only transform yourself into something of a challenge rating 1/4. However, if we are giving ourselves sidekick levels, we now have levels. Therefore, we can choose to be like, oh, we're level 1 now. Well, we can turn into anything that's challenge rating 1. And as we level up, we've gained sidekick levels, so that will, in my mind, that applies to Polymorph. It also has the action of superior invisibility. It magically turns invisible until its concentration ends, as if concentrating on a spell. Any equipment the Pixie wears or carries is invisible with it. Now, it just turns invisible until its concentration ends. It doesn't say it turns invisible if it casts a spell. It doesn't say it turns invisible if it makes an attack, deals damage, forces an enemy to make a saving throw, any of that. So, by that logic, the only way the Pixie drops its invisibility is by casting another concentration-based spell, or somehow getting hit with an AoE damage spell of some kind, and then getting knocked out of concentration. But based on that, it can maintain concentration on staying invisible pretty much indefinitely. And again, if you were to choose, say, the spellcaster at level 20, you will have the ability where you can't lose concentration on a spell. This technically isn't a spell, but it says as if concentrating on a spell, so you potentially might not be able to drop concentration at all. You also have a 14 wisdom and a 15 charisma, so you stand a pretty good chance to be a spellcaster, given the fact that you could either choose to go with the healer route and be either, a cleric or druid spell list, or go the other way and what is it called? The prodigy, and either having the bard or warlock spell list. I do still think it's funny that they didn't give sorcerer spell list anywhere in here. You have wizard, cleric and druid, and then bard and warlock, but no sorcerer spell list. I always thought that was kind of funky. But even if you choose to go the warrior route, or you choose to go the expert route to kind of be the sneaky, spooky, you know, not spooky, but the sneaky sort of burglary rogue type. Talk about being a great rogue, having proficiency with perception and stealth out the gate, having a 20 dexterity and unending invisibility. You could be an amazing expert. And you still have access to all of these spells regardless of the form you take. Again, obviously, if you choose to be a spellcaster, you just have bolstered your spellcasting ability even more. And remember, as you level up, your proficiency goes up. You can add ability scores to boost your ability, add ability score improvements to increase that, therefore increasing the charisma-based spell save DC. The only detriment that the Pixie has is it starts with 1 hit point. However, you gain hit dice as you level. So again, were you to go with the warrior, you'll get new hit dice. And I think, does it say, what is it at the start here? Whenever it gains a new level, it gains 1 hit die and its hit point maximum increases. To determine the amount of the increase, roll the hit die that appears in the stat block. So it has a D4 hit die, which is the biggest detriment to it, which I guess we probably should have talked about. Some of the other ones having larger hit dice gives them a benefit there. But you could also choose to increase its constitution. There's nothing that says you can't give magic items to any of your sidekicks. You pop an amulet of life, or amulet of health, whatever, the one that sets your constitution to 19 on a pixie. And this thing just becomes that much more survivable. So, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. This is an interesting thing to think about. I really like the concept of the funky animals that speak their own language that allows them to be a spellcaster, like my Flying Spirit Guardians of Doom, Giant Owl Cleric. I think that would be amazing. I would love that. And if a DM wants to invite me to a game and I can have an owl sidekick that casts Spirit Guardians, well, consider me looking for that game. So anyway, let me know. I'm sure there's some that I missed. I don't know. Like I said, I started going through the list. There's like so many pages of these, and these were the ones that jumped out to me as the biggest options here that could fit that stat block. So let me know in the comments down below. I guess perhaps maybe a sprite would have been another option that you could have looked into. But I think the Pixie is better because of the magic. So anyway, thank you once again to my patrons over on Patreon who continue to support me and the channel and are the ones who voted for this topic today. So if you sit there and go, I don't really like this topic, Ted, I think we should have done something else. Well, joining the Patreon is an opportunity to cast that vote each week and change what the content is going to be. I usually do a vote, and then I choose the primary winner for the first week, and then the runner-up gets to choose for the second week. So if you want to join now, potentially, you could vote and possibly change what the outcome of next week's Top 10 Tuesday will be. Also, if you like what I do here, like seeing me constantly cover things like Candlekeep Mysteries and new content, new other stuff as it comes out, consider subscribing to the channel. We are past 65,000 subscribers, and my birthday is July 12th, and I would love to get a play button for my birthday, therefore hitting 100,000 subscribers. And really, I can say all I want, but only you have the power to make that a reality. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.